Just after sunrise on June 10th, 1912, something about the Moore house in Villisca, Iowa, didn't look right. The place was too quiet. Neighbor Mary Peckham noticed that no one had come out for the morning chores. In a town that small, people knew each other's routines, and the Moore family had a full house that night. Josiah and Sarah Moore were home with their 4 children, and 2 sisters from town, Lena and Ina Stillinger, had stayed over after a church program. By that hour, somebody should have been awake. Mary grew uneasy and reached out to Ross Moore, Josiah's brother. Ross came over with a key and went inside. What he found turned one quiet Iowa home into one of the most famous unsolved murder cases in American history. All 8 people inside were dead, and more than 100 years later, the question that settled over Villisca that morning still hasn't lifted. Who walked through that house in the dark, killed an entire family and their guests, and vanished? The story starts the evening before, on Sunday, June 9th. It was Children's Day at the Presbyterian Church in Villisca. The Moore family went to the program like so many other families in town. Josiah Moore was there with his wife Sarah and their children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. Also with them that night were Lena and Ina Stillinger, 2 young sisters who had been invited to spend the night. Nothing about that evening pointed toward what was coming. That's part of what has kept this case alive for so long. There was no city noise to disappear into, no huge crowd, no anonymous apartment building. This was a small town, the kind of place where people knew the family, knew the house, and knew the rhythms of the street. At some point around 9:45 or 10 o'clock that night, the family returned home with the Stillinger girls. Then the house went dark. Sometime between midnight and dawn, someone moved through it room by room. Investigators believed most of the victims were asleep when they were attacked. Every person in the home had been bludgeoned with an axe, likely Josiah Moore's own axe. That detail alone is horrifying. But the part that has always made Villisca feel even colder is the thought of how the killer may have moved through that house, not in a rush, not in panic, but with enough control to keep going from one room to the next. And when people later looked at the scene, it got stranger. Mirrors in the house had been covered. Windows had also been covered. A slab of bacon had been left out. Bloody water was found in the home, and the axe was still there. Those details have never settled into one clean explanation. They raise the kind of questions that keep a case alive for decades. Did the killer linger after the murders? Did he know the house well enough to move through it in the dark? Was he hiding in the home before the family ever came back from church? Or did he enter later, once everyone had gone to sleep? No one could answer those questions with confidence then, and it became even harder to answer them once the town realized what had happened. The morning discovery brought people running. News spread fast, and the Moore house filled with townspeople before the crime scene could be properly secured. People stepped inside, moved through rooms, touched things, and disturbed what might have been the best evidence. That was one of the worst turns in the entire case. Today, people hear the phrase contaminated crime scene so often it can lose its force. In Villisca, it changed everything. The house may have held the clearest answers anyone was ever going to get, and almost immediately, those answers were blurred. So from the very beginning, investigators were chasing a killer while the trail was already being damaged beneath their feet. And that is one reason the case has never really let go of people. It feels like it should be solvable. There was a house, there was a small overnight window, there were 8 victims under one roof, there were physical details people never forgot, and still, the story never locked into place. Over the years, several theories took hold. The name that comes up most often is Reverend George Kelly. Kelly was a traveling minister who had been in Villisca around the time of the murders. He later drew heavy suspicion for a mix of reasons: his behavior, his unusual interest in the case, and a confession that has been argued over for decades. On paper, that sounds like the kind of break that should close a case. A man connected to the town, strange behavior, a confession. But Villisca never works that way. Kelly later recanted. The confession itself remained deeply questionable, and when the case reached court in 1917, it still did not end with certainty. One trial ended in a hung jury, another ended in acquittal. So the suspect most people know by name was never convicted. and that pushed the case right back into the fog. Another figure tied to the case was Frank Jones, a powerful local businessman. He became part of the story because of reported business tension with Josiah Moore. That theory gave people something they often look for in a case like this: a personal motive, a local grudge, a reason the violence might have been aimed at one particular family. But that theory had the same problems so many Villisca theories have had. Rumor carried it farther than evidence did. And once again, the story would move toward an answer only to stop short. Other ideas also grew around the case. Some people have leaned toward the thought of a drifter or serial killer. Others have believed the killer must have had inside knowledge of the Moore house, the family's schedule, or both. Every theory explains something. None explains enough. That's the frustration at the heart of Villisca. If you look at the details one by one, they feel loaded with meaning. The covered mirrors, the covered windows, the food left out, the bloody water, the axe left behind, the quiet movement through a modest house without the whole place erupting into noise. It all feels deliberate. But deliberate does not automatically mean understood. And that gap between strangeness and proof is why this case has stayed for more than a century. There's also another reason the murders in Villisca are remembered so strongly. 6 of the 8 victims were children. That fact changes the emotional weight of the entire story. It strips away any comfortable distance. This wasn't a bar fight, a public shooting, or a crime in some shadowy corner of a big city. It happened in a family home, after church, after a sleepover had been arranged, after what should have been a completely normal summer evening. The house itself became part of the story. People can still picture it. The bedrooms, the staircase, the rooms where the family should have been safest. Even without any ghost story attached to it, the setting alone is enough to unsettle people. You don't need anything supernatural when the real facts are already this hard to sit with. And in some ways, that may be why Villisca still stands out from so many other old murder cases. It doesn't depend on one huge twist. It works on you slowly. First, there's the simple setup. A family comes home from church with 2 young guests. Then there's the morning silence. Then the discovery. Then the realization that the killer may have had time inside the house after the murders. Then the ruined crime scene. Then the suspects who almost fit. Then the confession that still doesn't settle anything. And finally, the hardest part of all. The answer never comes. Even now, if you step back and ask the central question, it is still the same one people were asking in 1912. Who did this? Was it someone close enough to know the family's routine? Was it someone who slipped into the house unseen and waited? Was George Kelly the right suspect after all, despite the shaky confession and the acquittal? Was Frank Jones part of the truth, or just part of the legend that built up afterward? Or did the real killer move through Villisca, leave behind a scene no one would ever forget, and disappear before anyone understood what they were looking at? That uncertainty is the ending. Not a solved case, not a final reveal, just a silence that has lasted for generations. The Villisca Axe murders remain unsolved. No one was definitively convicted of killing Josiah and Sarah Moore, their children Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, and their overnight guests Lena and Ina Stillinger. The house is still known today as the Villisca Axe Murder House, and for many people it remains one of the most haunting places tied to an American crime story. But the real reason this case endures isn't just the house, it's the unfinished space the murders left behind. A family went to church on a Sunday night. They came home with plans for the next morning. Morning came anyway. And the truth never did. As always, visit us at readtherealstory.com for more unbelievable true stories. Until next time, stay curious.